Hello, and thank you for watching this chat about making theater accessible. I'm Katie Yo. I am a theater maker, educator, and advocate based in the US with over 2 decades of experience creating work alongside performers with intellectual and developmental disabilities. And today I'm going to share a little bit more about my approach to nurturing inclusive and accessible creative practices. So we have just about 20 minutes together for this chat, and my goal is to give a really brief introduction to me, my work, and an overview of some key support strategies. And then we can dive more in detail into these during our session together on August 26th. So our agenda today is this. We're going to first do a quick access check. Then I'll share a bit more about me and the company I founded called ABLE, Artists Breaking Limits and Expectations. I'll give some key context for the disability community that I work with here in the US. And then we'll dive into some support strategies. We'll look at some examples from rehearsals and performances and think of ways that we can make theater more inclusive. We'll finish out with some bigger thoughts about disability representation before we wrap it up with a checkout. So first up, just an access check for yourself. I want you to do what you need to do to make yourself comfortable and ensure that you can best access this material. So adjust the lights and the volume to a level that you like. Maybe you have a notebook or something that you want to use to take notes. I have a favorite fidget so that I can keep my hands busy as we're talking. And of course, this is recorded, so you can pause, go back, or just take a break whenever you need it. Okay, so first up, who am I and why am I the person talking to you? Well, like I said, I'm Katie. I trained as an actor first and foremost. I earned my BFA in drama from Syracuse University, and I spent several years living the actor's life, auditioning, working on different shows. But during dress rehearsal for a performance, I had an accident that led me to question what I really wanted from my career. A lot of times in theater, we hear no's. No, you didn't get that part. No, you're not right for this role. No, you didn't get the rights to the show you wanted to do. And I really wanted instead to do work that nurtured community and that celebrated possibility, work that said yes. So this inspired me to pursue a master's in applied theater from the Royal Central School for Speech and Drama in London. And while I was there, I collaborated on creative learning projects with a range of different companies, big and small, including Access All Areas, Age Exchange, and Little Angel Theater. Then in 2016, back in Chicago, I founded ABLE, Artists Breaking Limits and Expectations. It's a nonprofit organization that's dedicated to creating theater and film for, with, and by individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities. We'll talk a little bit more about it in a second. But I have produced and directed over 30 productions, ranging from stage plays to feature films and digital projects that all feature neurodiverse ensembles. This has also included adapting 8 stories from the classical canon, including the critically acclaimed Frankenstein, which was produced in partnership with Chicago Shakespeare Theater, and we'll talk a little bit more about that towards the end of our presentation today. As a leader with a non-apparent disability, I center accessibility throughout my creative process. From the very, very beginning to the very end, it's a consideration in everything that I do. And I want to approach my work with the ethos that the arts belong to everyone. So I enjoy working collaboratively with my performers and with my casts to devise their own stories or to find themselves in classical pieces. And I employ a range of different performance styles, everything from straight acting to music to movement and puppetry. I believe in the power of the arts to forge new connections, and I've traveled with the Center for International Theater Development as part of the Linkages Poland project. And I also support other arts professionals by leading trainings. Here in Chicago, I've worked with Northlight Theater, Paramount Theater, and the Lyric Opera, among others. But as I mentioned, the center of my career, I spent over a decade as the executive artistic director of a company called ABLE, which again stands for Artists Breaking Limits and Expectations. ABLE is a Chicago-based nonprofit that creates theater and film projects for, with, and by individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities. And we do that work with participants ages 15 and up through 2 branches of programming. ABLE's ensembles are the core program of the company. This is where a group of actors with intellectual and developmental disabilities collaborate with a team of teaching artists and volunteer facilitators to create a project. That might be a stage play, it might be a digital project that we film on Zoom, but we stage and share these in collaboration with professional theaters around the city of Chicago. The second branch of programming for ABLE are outreach programs, and that's where ABLE teaching artists go out into the community to the places where people with disabilities are already living and working and playing, and offer workshops and residencies at schools, community centers, and group homes. ABLE is the only organization in Chicago that is focused on performers with intellectual and developmental disabilities and gives them the opportunity to create original work, and also prioritizes leadership opportunities for our disabled participants. ABLE really advocates for radical accessibility both on stage and off stage, so for our actors, for our audiences, and for our entire crew. And by placing disability in the spotlight, ABLE aims to create more inclusive, empathetic communities. Before we go too much further, I just want to unite us around some terminology since we're all coming from different backgrounds here. So, as the late activist Alice Wong reminded us, disability is not a monolith. Disability exists in every community. 1 in 4 adults in the US has a disability, but we know that everybody speaks about disability differently. So you've heard me mention intellectual and developmental disability a few times, and I use this as an umbrella term that is used to describe a wide range of disabilities. A developmental disability is a condition that is present at birth or before the age of 18, and a developmental disability might impact physical ability, something like spina bifida or cerebral palsy. It might impact cognition, like some types of autism, or it might have both a physical and a cognitive impact, like Down syndrome or Williams syndrome. I call this out because I know in some places around the world, these are referred to as learning disabilities. But in the US, learning disability implies disabilities like dyslexia that impact cognition only. So I just want to make sure we're clear when I say I work with actors with intellectual and developmental disabilities, it's folks that have both a physical and a cognitive component. It's also important to note that in our system in the US, individuals with disabilities can stay in the public school system until they turn 22 years old. Once they turn 22, there's a sharp decline in services that leaves a lot of people looking for ways to spend their days. Creative and social opportunities may no longer be accessible or affordable for them, and many advocates refer to this time as falling off the cliff. As a result, a lot of adults with disabilities face increased rates of loneliness and isolation. The Surgeon General in the US recently declared an epidemic of loneliness and isolation and warned of the significant toll that loneliness can take on physical and mental health. For individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities, this can include a regression of communication skills and things like early onset dementia, anxiety, and depression. So, the arts are really important. And while I, of course, believe in creating projects with artistic rigor, my background in applied theater means I'm looking at how the arts and theater in specific can create intentional community for everyone, whether they want to be a professional actor or not. Collaborative arts programs can build connections between participants and can also support other transferable skills like communication, confidence, and emotional literacy. So that's one of the reasons why inclusive theater really matters. But let's talk about how we do it. I'm going to share some big tips here, but one thing I really want you to remember as we talk about support strategies is that there's no such thing as a one-size-fits-all approach to accessibility. As the saying goes, if you've met one person with a disability, you have met one person with a disability. Just because two people have the same or a similar disability, that doesn't mean that they're going to need the same type of support. And just because somebody needs help with one thing, that doesn't mean they're going to need help with everything. What helps you might not help me. And what helps me today might not help me tomorrow. People's needs change day to day and in different situations. So accessibility really requires that we are flexible and adaptable, and that we're okay with messing up. We're never going to get it perfect, and that's okay. You can apologize, you can ask questions, and you can try again to do better. We want to remember that the spectrum of needs is not linear. Somebody is not more disabled or less disabled. I like this comic from Autism Sketches. There's also a great comic book called Understanding the Spectrum by an artist named Rebecca Burgess that really helps to illustrate this. Instead of focusing on what someone can or can't do, we want to focus on what they need from us. Maybe someone has high support needs. They need a lot of help with things like communication or sensory support. But maybe they have low support needs and their needs aren't as obvious to us. You can also be more specific. You can say someone needs help with communication, or they need more time to transition between activities. All of this comes to my real top tip, which is that we want to presume competence. We want to presume that a person with a disability has the capacity to think, to learn, and to understand. Not speaking doesn't mean that they're not understanding. If we're being disability affirmative in our work, then we need to honor that everybody has potential. Our job as leaders is to figure out the best way for everyone to connect to the material. So this is an idea from psychologist Lev Vygotsky, that there's a sweet spot between what someone can do on their own versus what they can do with help. It's called the zone of proximal development. And I want to call out that help doesn't mean that we're doing something for someone. We want to still challenge people. We can set high expectations, but we also want to be deliberate in how we're scaffolding our sessions, making sure we're offering appropriate support so that our spaces are set up so that everyone can learn and grow and do their best work. One way that we can do this is to bring in extra support. You're just one person. Theater is inherently a collaborative art form. We know that nobody makes anything alone. So at ABLE, for example, keeps a 2-to-1 ratio of actors to trained support. If there's 10 actors in the room, there's also 2 teaching artists and 3 facilitators there. There are non-disabled folks in the room who can attend to individual access needs, explain things in a different way, and model participation. Modeling is hugely important. We know that a lot of people learn by watching. So seeing someone else in the space who is willing to make mistakes, who's willing to look silly, who will give it their all, can really help others to feel comfortable and confident to do the same thing. A third way we can make our spaces inclusive is to follow a predictable routine. So every rehearsal that I lead follows the same basic format. We start with a dance party. This is so that people are free to enter the space in their own unstructured way and maybe get some of their energy out before I need them to focus. Then we review the schedule together. We do a check-in so I know how everyone is feeling on the day, or we can think together around a topic. Then we warm up. We get our bodies, our voices, our brains ready for the session. And then we dive into small group work or scenes and activities that help to build out whatever performance we're making. We take a moment to check out together, to reflect on our time together, and we finish with a closing ritual so everybody knows that the session is over and we can mark that end and that transition back to the real world together. Predictable schedules like this help an ensemble to build trust, to feel relaxed, and to feel safer then to take creative risks in the room. People can use up a lot of energy processing new information, so letting them know what to expect and what is expected of them helps to ease anxiety. One way to do this is to send out what we call a social story in advance of a session. A social story is a short narrative that includes words and pictures, or it might also be in video format, and that helps explain a new situation. Up on the screen, I'm sharing a short excerpt from a social story that talks about logging in for a virtual rehearsal and how to set up your device. I also create social stories or sensory guides for audiences so they know what they will see at the show. Access is important for them too. Another way to set clear, predictable expectations is with an access agreement. I start the rehearsal process by creating a pact with the ensemble for how we'll agree to work together. We brainstorm what support looks like for us and agree on how we're going to show up for and with each other in the room. We can also address what needs people have in the space. This is something that we can hang up on the wall and we refer back to throughout the process. So those expectations, again, are predictable and are clear. Clear expectations are really important, and so is clear communication. Sometimes I want to call this out that some people will adopt a voice when they speak to people with a disability. They get that kind of like high-pitched voice like they're talking to children. But your intonation, your volume, your tone should be the same when you're talking to anybody. We can be clear without being condescending. So we want to speak in simple sentences, but it's important to speak like yourself. Give your instructions one at a time in the order you want them to happen. And don't focus on what you don't want people to do. Instead, tell them what you do want them to do. So instead of saying, don't touch the props, I'm going to say, hey, keep your hands to yourself. We also want to keep our communication positive and validate people's feelings. So I might say something like, I understand you're tired. Do you want to take a break and try again later? Or I know you're so excited to get on stage, but I need you to sit here until it's time. We also want to give people time to process our verbal instructions. You need to be patient. Someone might not answer you right away, but that doesn't mean that they didn't hear you. They might just be thinking. So in general, we want to give people a 7 to 10 second wait time so that they can process your questions or your instructions and then respond. 7 to 10 seconds might feel like a lot longer than we're used to, but it's good to give things some breathing room. We also know that not everybody processes information through speech, so another tip is to present information in different formats. Everyone communicates and learns in different ways, so we try to provide information in every rehearsal in at least 2 ways. I'm going to say the instruction out loud, and I'm also going to show it to you with a physical demonstration. I'm going to give you these instructions, but I've also put it out on a visual aid. We create visual support tools all the time in rehearsals that can be hung up in the space, not just the visual schedule like I showed you earlier, but also character posters like the ones here, or even choice boards. Rachel here is holding up a visual with sentence stems to help people give feedback. Sometimes just asking someone, oh, what did you think, is too broad. There's so many possible answers, they can't think of what they actually want to say. So a sentence stem can help people focus their thoughts. I can ask, do you want to give a celebration? Do you want to give a challenge? Or do you want to give a suggestion? And then there's a couple stems on this poster that give them examples of the types of things that they could say. It's also important to create options for people. Choice boards let people share their input without speaking. So here's a choice board for an activity called Yes, Let's. In this game, we ask people to name something they do and that they want to do, and then the rest of the ensemble says, yes, let's, and acts it out. So if I hold up this poster, someone can point to their choice, even if they don't speak. I might also hold out my hands and ask, would you like to bake a cake or play basketball? And the person can touch my hand for which one they choose. This is so important because often people with disabilities are infantilized and denied agency because they don't speak. But again, not speaking is not the same as not understanding. And of course, just a caveat that if we're creating visuals, we're following accessibility guidelines, including things like color contrast, fonts, and layouts to make sure they're as readable as possible. Okay, our next tip is to support sensory regulation. To be neurodiversity affirming, we have to acknowledge that everybody in the space is going to deal with sensory input in different ways. And there's a lot of sensory input that is inherent in theater. We have lights, we have music, we have different costumes that feel different ways on our skin. We've got unpredictable audiences. So we want to give people space to acknowledge how they're feeling and regulate as needed. So someone in your space will have, every person in your space is going to have a different sensory style. Someone might be hyposensitive, meaning that they have low sensitivity to a sense, or they might be hypersensitive, meaning they're very sensitive to one or more senses. If someone's hyposensitive, you might actually see them seeking out a specific stimulus because they're not getting enough of it. Maybe they like to really intensely stretch this noodle because they want that kinesthetic input. But if someone's hypersensitive, they might try to avoid different stimulus. Okay, pop quiz. Can you name 8 senses? Most people can give me a solid 5, but there are some others that we want to think about in our spaces and our places that might be impacting people. When we plan our sessions and our spaces, we should be thinking with all 8 of these senses in mind. So thinking of the sense of sight, we can use bright, distinctive marks in the space so people can clearly see where they're supposed to go. We also want to think about as presenters wearing solid colored clothing without too many busy, distracting patterns. For the sight of sound, we want to remember that sometimes it's hard for people to differentiate different sounds. So the soothing background music that you're playing under an activity might actually stop someone from being able to hear your instructions. Or if there's different groups working in different areas of the room, someone might not be able to hone in on what the people in their group are saying. Those folks might want noise-canceling headphones to help filter sounds, or you might just want to think about using separate studios for group work. We want to think about the sense of touch, not just because we know we shouldn't be touching anybody with their consent, but also thinking about how different costumes feel for people, or maybe offering things like weight pads for someone who really wants some touch stimulus. We want to offer scent-free rehearsals so we're not overwhelming people who are sensitive to different smells. And we want to think about taste as well, maybe having things like cough drops or mints available if somebody really needs some extra stimulus, but also knowing that if someone is lower sensitive to taste, they might be prone to putting non-food items in their mouth, and that's a normal thing for them. The last 3 are ones that people forget about more often. Our vestibular sense is our sense of balance. To support folks with this, we want to think about taking movement breaks. We want to be sensitive to how our choreography maybe has a lot of sudden changes of direction that could throw someone off balance. We also want to give people time to get their big movements out. Proprioception is somebody's sense of where they are in space. So we want to think about, for our folks who struggle with this, they might not be as aware of how close or far they are to something. We want to be mindful of how we're arranging props and furniture in the room, and also be respectful of each other's personal space. Interoception is someone's sense of what's happening inside their own body. We want to give folks breaks, give folks time to attend to their own needs. I also keep a first aid kit in rehearsals of tools like headphones, sunglasses, fidgets, weighted pads, essential oil rollers, things so that people can get the sensory stimulus that they need. And I like to offer a quiet zone where people can take a break if they need to and then can rejoin later. Another tool I use is something called zones of regulation. I keep a board in rehearsal and everyone can put a sticky with their name on one of 4 different zones. The green zone is where ideally we all want to be. We're feeling regulated, calm, ready to work. The yellow zone is maybe if you're a little bit more heightened energy, you have some nervous or anxious energy. The blue zone is if you're feeling lower energy, maybe tired, sad, or just a little blah today. And in the red zone is to let us know you're having some big, difficult feelings like anger or feeling out of control. You're having a hard time regulating. This is a simple nonverbal way for people to communicate how they're feeling. And then as a director, I can modify my rehearsal activities accordingly. Because my final tip is I want to make it personal. We're working with people. The better you know somebody's access needs, the better you're going to be able to plan for their needs and support them in the moment. And what is the best way to know someone's needs? You ask them. At ABLE, they send a new actor questionnaire to every participant to try to get to know a bit more about them and how they might respond in rehearsal. So a questionnaire might include something like, what gets you excited? How do I know that you're happy or excited? What ticks you off? And how would I know that you're upset? Who are some important people in your life that you might talk about? What are some of your favorite hobbies or special interests? How do you best express yourself? How can we best communicate with you? We're going to move a lot in rehearsal. Can you let me know any issues or restrictions you have with mobility or movement? Things like getting up and down from the floor or cardiovascular limits. Sometimes working in a theater or a film set involves sensory triggers like big lights, amplified sound, different costume materials. So please share your sensory sensitivities that we can plan for. Let us know if you have any allergies. Let us know your preference for break schedules. All these types of questions can help us to intentionally craft a space that accommodates as many different needs as possible. And every person we're going to meet has needs. There's no special needs. There's just human needs. All of this is in service of better disability representation. So according to a 2019 National Endowment for the Arts study, only 7% of arts workers identified as disabled. While diversity representation in media has improved over the past several years, it's still rare for us to see people with intellectual and developmental disabilities on our screens and our stages. We know, though, that 1 in 4 individuals has a disability, but a comprehensive study of all network TV and streaming services by the Ruderman Family Foundation found that while roughly half of the TV shows out there featured a character with a disability, on average, 21% of those roles were portrayed authentically by a disabled actor. Within that same study, they found that roles for individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities were the least likely to be written and the least likely to be cast authentically. Just 13% of those characters were played by someone with an actual disability. We don't talk about disability enough, and that can lead to a lot of stigma about what it means to have a disability and what people with disabilities can do. But being on stage is a position of power. So often we're told not to talk about disability or we're told to look away. But for the hour or two that a performance lasts, that audience has to look and they have to listen. And hopefully this leads to better understanding. People can see that folks with disabilities can have jobs, they can have relationships, they communicate in all different ways, they have all different feelings, and then we can imagine different futures and different possibilities together. But sometimes, even in inclusive companies, the larger roles go to performers who are more typically abled. So I want to challenge us to think about how we can make space for an actor who can't read a script. What about an actor who struggles with short-term memory and remembering their lines? Or an actor who's non-speaking? One performance methodology that I've used over the years is something called dropping in. It's just one way to help all different performers of all different levels of literacy, all different communication styles to feel successful and supported on stage and draw our audiences into a circle of understanding. So for this to work, rather than pressuring an actor to memorize their lines or having them read from their script and get kind of stuck behind a piece of paper, each performer is paired with a facilitator who drops in their lines. The actor then gets to repeat that line back and add their own flair and personality to the mix. So this is a technique borrowed from Shakespeare and Company in Massachusetts. They use it just as a rehearsal tool so that actors don't have scripts in their hands during rehearsals, but I've employed it on stage in performances and on film sets as well. In this picture, you can see me dropping in Sam in a production of The Odyssey. We played Odysseus together. This allows us to tackle really complex texts, even Shakespeare. This is Peter and I in a production of A Midsummer Night's Dream. Peter is non-speaking, but communicates a ton through gesture and through vocalizations. I could say the lines, he can act them out, and then the audience understands what he means. Many people have a lot of ideas, particularly about Shakespeare, about it being elite and exclusive and something that only certain people can do. So I think it's really important for us to subvert these ideas. It's important for people to see disabled performers claim ownership over these stories and really challenge our audiences to reconsider who theater belongs to and who gets to call themselves a serious performer. But including actors in the development process is crucial. The more actors have a part in creating a production, the more ownership they're going to have over the piece, and then the stronger their performance will be, and the better we can highlight their true talents. I love devising original work for this reason. It's the most impactful way to ensure that the piece you've made truly plays to the strengths of everyone in the cast. For my most recent project, The Time Capsule, this original piece was devised in collaboration with an ensemble of 11 actors with intellectual and developmental disabilities around the theme of memories. Ensemble members each answered a questionnaire with prompts like, what do you think the world will be like in 100 years? And tell me about a time you felt free, or what advice would you give to yourself? And then we used those answers to craft personal narratives, movement pieces, and longer sequences that helped them to tell their own stories and share their own imaginations with an audience. The writing process involved mining their responses for common threads and singular stories, so we wound up shaping a narrative about a team of explorers from the future who found a time capsule with different memories inside. The show blended personal stories with movement and object work so that we were highlighting all different styles of communication and performance. But you can take this approach even when adapting classical texts. When we were working on Frankenstein, for example, my co-director and husband, Lawrence, and I started rehearsals with only about 70% of the script written. We used our time in rehearsals to have actors improvise scenes, put speeches in their own words, or find new ways to share moments of the story. That included developing movement pieces and choreographing and blocking scenes together. When you hear Frankenstein, most people picture a grunting green monster with big silver neck bolts, but we flipped this to a punk rock inspired adaptation of this Gothic classic and really tried to highlight the creature's experience and the creature's search for connection. In rehearsals, we had cast discussions where our neurodiverse ensemble shared their own experiences of being judged, underestimated, or feeling out of control. A particularly vivid conversation in the devising process centered on the creature's wish for Victor to make him a partner. So many of our actors are infantilized or desexualized, and the group had a lot to offer about what it means to have a partner and their own wishes for being in a romantic relationship. We were able to turn this into a monologue that actor Zach shared as the rest of the cast did a choreographed mirroring activity that highlighted the theme of connection. I've shared a clip of this sequence from Frankenstein that will also allow you to see dropping in action. I want to be respectful of our time, so I'm going to wrap it up for today. But as we do, I just want to encourage you to take some time for processing and reflection. In rehearsal, I ask actors to share 4 things. Your rose. This is something beautiful from the session, maybe something you really liked or something that was exciting for you. Your thorn. Something difficult about the session, maybe something that felt confusing or something that you wish had happened differently or that we had more time on. A seed. What's a new idea that you're taking away from the session today? And water. What support do you need to help bring this idea into your work and into fruition? Again, that's all the time we have for today, but I do want to encourage you to share your reflections. Please stay in touch. You can find me on my website at katieyo.com, or you can also follow Abel on Abel's website at abelensemble.com, or feel free to reach out to me via email and let me know your reflections or your questions from today. Thanks again. Take care.